All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us this Friday evening. I hope you all had a wonderful week leading up to this last webinar that we have as a series of 8 that we have with the Asian Parent and the Media Corp for the Singapore Parenting Festival. All right. So we do have something very interesting for those of you whose kids are getting ready for the PSLE, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but in the very near future. So as today's topic implies, well, it does suggest it's never too early to prepare for PSLE. So we do have a couple of experts, Dr. Annabelle Chow and Meng Hui, who is going to be speaking with you guys and addressing some of your burning questions as well. Okay, so yes, thank you so much for joining us today once again for the Singapore Parenting Festival that is proudly brought to you by the Asian Parent and Media Corp. We also have our Go partners, PCF Sparkle Tots, Max Grow, Scott's, and content partners, Mums for Life, Dads for Life, Center for Fathering, and Hoya to make this year's Singapore Parenting Festival possible. Okay, so this is me. All right, for those of you meeting me for the first time, I'm Dawn. I'm a mom of 4 daughters. I run a couple of businesses, but I also am very active on social media. So if you're meeting me again, hello again. All right. I also do have 2 very, very experienced experts with us for tonight's topic. All right. So first up, let me introduce you guys to Dr. Annabelle Chow. All right. She's a clinical psychologist, right? And then she's a principal clinical psychologist at her own practice, right? Annabelle Psychology, registered with the Singapore Register of Psychologists and accredited by the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency. All right. So she does provide therapy to families, adults, and adolescents. Been doing that for more than a decade already. So questions directed to her, I'm sure she's going to be able to help you guys. And with the young, she does specialize in complex childhood trauma, emotional dysregulation, and social emotional difficulties as well. All right. So you'll hear from Dr. Annabelle Chow in a while. Let me just introduce you guys as well to our other expert, Meng Hui, who is a senior education consultant at KooBits. All right. So he's a father of 2 primary school kids. That means PSLE coming soon for you also, Meng Hui. He's also a tutor for over 18 years. All right. So he has been teaching and inspiring for more than 1,000 students already. So his passion has led him to understand how he can help students to improve their mindsets and to accelerate their ability to learn as well. All right. So he's got a good track record of turning reluctant students into happy learners. So questions that you have to, help your kids out, I'm sure Meng Hui will be able to help you to see how he can make it more interesting and more fun for your kids, right, to learn. So he's also hosted webinars for KooBits parents for over a year on various learning tips and how to prepare for PSLE also, right? So his experiences and expertise will definitely benefit all of us tonight. I've got a PSLE girl next year, so I'm going to be paying a lot of attention tonight as well. Okay, I'm going to now introduce you guys a little bit more. So first expert, Dr. Annabelle. All right. So Dr. Annabelle, how old is your oldest one now? I know you have 2 kids, right?
Yes, and I'm not ready for PSLE yet.
I don't think any
the oldest one is 5. Still some way to PSLE.
Wow, but we have some friends here, not parents yet, already joining this webinar.
Never too early, right?
Never too early. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Dr. Annabelle.
Thanks, Dawn, and thank you to the Asian Parent for inviting me to share a little bit more about the emotional aspects of supporting our child through PSLE. I'm happy to take as many questions as you might have, and if you just put it into the chat box, I will try to get to that at the end of the session. So maybe I thought I would start with some statistics. So we have actually found that in Singapore, at least 76% of our students have actually reported that even though they feel well prepared for a test, they still feel very anxious. And almost 60% feel very tense when they study. And 82% of our Singaporean students share that they want to be one of the best students in my class. And actually, even in my own clinical experience, I have found that there has been a shift over the last few years, that very early on in my career, I do hear a lot of children coming in and telling me that it's the parents who have expectations of me to do well, to come in the first, second, third of the class and of the cohort. And then subsequently, I find that the shift has been more, actually my parents don't really put that much expectations onto me, but it's myself, right? Like I have expectations of myself. I am in some kind of competition with my best friend and I want to do better than them and I cannot lose. And so there's a lot of that pressure, or a lot of like sibling pressure that, you know, my brother or sister had done pretty well and have gotten to a school of their choice. And I also want to be like that. So I think in supporting, like for me particularly, a lot more of the like lower secondary type of students, they do also report that coming out of PSLE, there was a lot of stress, a lot of pressure in preparation, and they didn't feel very equipped to deal with the stress emotionally. And I guess this is what I'm here to share about. So some signs of anxiety basically is that if you find that your child is telling you, I can't study anymore, or they may not even go to school, they start playing truant, or you find that their concentration levels are affected, or you find that they're completely disinterested in what they would have otherwise liked to do, like music, like sports, like art, and they're telling you that they're feeling sick, you know, probably in the younger children, our primary school going students, they might tell you that I have a lot of like stomach aches, headaches, and even the younger kids, right? There might be even bedwetting episodes. Or they might report like nightmares or difficulties sleeping and like appetite changes. These are actually some symptoms of them facing some anxiety and stress. Or, you know, the children that we see, they tend to actually report more physical symptoms than adults generally will. Then often parents might ask me, what's the difference between stress, depression, and anxiety? I suppose depression and anxiety is really like a clinical diagnosis. And if you feel like your child is experiencing depression and anxiety, then you must really bring your child to a psychologist or even sometimes a psychiatrist for medications. So these are some of the symptoms that I've listed. So if you're worried whether your child is depressed, your child must exhibit at least 5 of these symptoms within a 2-week period. And this must happen almost every day. So sometimes, you know, because like the term, I feel depressed, I feel anxious, is quite a common term that is being thrown around both in a school setting and in a social setting. But in a clinical setting, it actually means that you must have at least minimally 5 of these criteria happening every day, and it must affect your functioning, which means your child has stopped going to school, your child stopped participating in any family events, dinners, parties, or even any kind of social interactions. So that's a clinical diagnosis. And if your child is diagnosed with any kind of anxiety disorder, this person must experience excessive anxiety for at least 6 months over different types of event. And there are different types of anxiety. So it can come in a form of like social anxiety or generalized anxiety. But basically, your child will find it very difficult to manage this anxiety. And it's so palpable that it can come in a form of physical symptoms. So I've had patients who come and tell me they were previously seeing a cardiologist or they were seeing a GP because they had their heart like beating so quickly and they're missing like, you know, the heartbeat is really, really high. Even for like a resting heartbeat, they can go up to 120 beats per minute, or like they have a lot of like pain, like heart pain, chest pain, and they cannot catch their breath and they feel like they're actually dying, or they thought that they're having a heart attack. So they may end up with like a doctor, they see a doctor, and then all tests might be clear. And if all medical tests are clear, then there's a possibility that this person is experiencing anxiety disorder, and this can be treated. Whether it is depression or anxiety, it is extremely treatable.
Wow, that's so important. And thank you so much for pointing all those out, Dr. Annabelle, because some of those can be easily brushed aside by some parents and just saying that, oh, my child is an introvert or turning into an introvert. And on the other end, it can be too extreme, right? So I think I actually took a picture of what you shared. And I think it's just...
You can have the slides up.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, this is just so you guys know, this is the last webinar already. Yeah. It is recorded, okay, and you guys can actually also, you know, check out some of the questions that were previously answered by other experts. But today's questions as well, you know, you can actually put it all in the Q&A box. If we didn't manage to answer it, our experts will still help you with it, and you can find it on Singapore Parenting Festival's website. Okay, so yes, back to you, Dr. Annabelle.
Okay, thanks, Dawn. So yeah, the most important thing about the clinical diagnosis is that it must actually impair your functioning, your ability to actually do the things that they would otherwise have done. Then that's the point that you might want to seek like school counselors, psychologists, and a lot of parents do share like they have concerns about medications. So maybe you can first seek like a therapist, and then from there the therapist can advise whether you need medications or not. So I wanted to also introduce the concept of like our brains, like being like a house under construction. So this helps to give a bit of insight as to how like our brains develop. And I wonder if that can often then have an impact on the expectations that we have on our children as well. So if you think about like the house under construction, when we are born, actually the external brain comes with us, right? Like our brain, you know, our external skull and head comes with us. And that's the external structure, but everything inside is not really wired properly. Like you think about the lightings, you think about the furniture, you think about the walls and the different rooms, they are actually all not set up. And then the very lower floors of a house, think about it like it's the most primitive kind of functions that we need. So one would be like to inform fight or flight decisions, right? And to do that, we need to have basic emotions kind of ingrained and inbuilt into us. That comes in anger and that comes in fear. So you might see like babies, they can actually express their anger, they can actually express fear. But as they grow older, then the different flaws of their brain or the house actually starts to develop. And that's what we call like the higher functioning order. That's the part where our cerebral cortex is a bit more developed and it helps them to think and form thoughts of their own, form opinions of their own, and to be able to understand the concepts that they learn in school. But at the same time, what that is doing is also giving them more skills and vocabulary to describe their emotions and to learn how to regulate their emotions. So actually, before the age of 7, this building of the brain is really the most crucial period for our children. So having like a healthy, you know, like a emotionally regulated environment, helping to manage the stress levels through modeling, of which we will talk about a bit more later, they are actually important building blocks to help our child survive what it's going to take to survive in society later. So at about the age of 2 is the most crucial building time. So if you think about like corridors, right, in your house, you've got the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. So the left side of the brain is really more where the logical thinking happens, and the right side is where the more emotional part happens. And in the middle is that corridor, right? So around 2 years old, this corridor is the part where you start to build on it. So you connect the both logical and emotional sides of your brain. So the completion of this house construction only completes in adulthood. So that means we cannot expect our children to be able to handle stress the way that adults can. We cannot expect them to handle concepts the way that adults can, because primarily their brains are just not built that way. Of course, once we get to adulthood around the age of 25, we will still continue to, if you think about our own house, renovate, we can add rooms, we can remove rooms, we can add furniture. So through different like modeling and different types of additions, we can still make adjustments to the house. But now the child, you know, your child is at that age that the brain is still building and the house is still building. So having that in mind, right, I think that some of the building principles to help facilitate the ability to have a comfortable house, a safe house, is really primarily building secure and healthy relationships with children. So myself, I work a lot with adults, right? And a lot of times with the adolescents and the adults, they are really already at that point that whatever that the parents say to them is really at most advisory. And I feel like you probably might be nodding your heads when you talk to your primary 6 child and you want them to do something that they want to do something else and they have a mind of their own, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But the only key factor that I have learned in my clinical practice and even myself as a mother is that unless we do have that relationship with them, we've built that runway with them, we will never really be able to exert control beyond a point. because they're going to have a mind of their own. So on that note, right, I think it's important to build that runway through being present with them. So being present means when they're telling you how stressed they are, or when they're telling you about what's happening in school, ditch the phone, right? Stop the messaging. And I am so guilty of that. Like sometimes it just happened last night. Even my 5-year-old child wanted to tell me something that happened in school about like Legoland, because he learned about Legoland from his classmates. And I was busy fighting fire, you know, with a situation happening in the clinic, and I was responding to my phone, and he was very frustrated with me, and he's like, "Mommy, throw the phone away, I'm talking to you."
Wow,
So
I
being
love it.
present. And so, yes, he's right. I'm sorry. And I own up, like, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. Now is your time. I will get back to clinic later. So be present, because being physically present is no use if you're not connecting with them.
Yeah.
Spending quality time, and quality time needs to be fun. If you're only spending time doing homework and preparing for PSLE, you are no fun. And if you're no fun, they do not want to be with you, and they do not want to spend time with you.
Yeah.
And if they don't want to spend time with you, you cannot build trust and respect. And if you can't build trust and respect, they're not going to come to you when they're stressed, when they cannot cope with what's happening in school. They will not feel like you have their backs. If every time they come to you and you tell them, I had it harder, or if you tell them that this is really nothing to stress about, they will stop coming to you after a while. So, and the last thing is the healthy response to emotions. And sometimes I have to admit, all of us, like, we have stressful lives, right? Like, I'm a full-time working mom. And sometimes when my child loses it, I also lose it, and then it becomes a jungle. But being like healthy, like a healthy parent, is acknowledging that, look, my child is having a meltdown moment. He's very stressed. He's not coping well. And instead of me adding to the mix, I can actually model like a healthy response to identify that it looks like you're really stressed now. Shall we get some water? You know, shall we take a breath? Shall we take a walk? So we can show a healthy model.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, from a psychologist's perspective, the thing about like it's never too early to prepare for PSLE. Where I will be coming from with the angle is really PSLE is but just a milestone in our life. It is not the end point, but more importantly, I see it as like a rehearsal to impart healthy responses to a stressful period, impart values that are important to us, like, for example, values of perseverance, values of not giving up, of, you know, curiosity of learning. And these are values that if they use, they can actually help make the learning for PSLE a little bit less painful, and also would help them survive O-levels, A-levels, and all their work situations that will come their way.
Yeah, so true.
So I think it's quite important to manage our own narrative as parents. I find that if we are very focused or very hyper-focused on the result that you need to get to and the outcome, that will mean that we might lose a bit of attention and focus on the process. And if we lose focus on the process, then we lose the opportunity for a teaching moment of values that we want to inculcate in them, for them to become people whom, you know, whatever that you want to groom them into, right? To be like useful people for society, or like to be kind, to be curious, any kind of values that you want them to develop. And because you know how the brain is still developing, our 12-year-old child, when they're overwhelmed, they're not actually really able to adequately express or regulate, primarily because the brain is really not built yet. The truth is, and you might probably, the truth is sometimes adults cannot regulate our own emotions too either, isn't it? Like, I am guilty of that. Sometimes I lose it too. And how can we then expect our 12-year-old child to regulate their emotions when they're very overwhelmed with stress? So perhaps we could also consider having like very realistic and healthy goals that maybe we can develop together with our child, instead of goals that we put there and then we want our child to get there. Maybe we can think about goals that we can both want to get to together, and then support each other to get to those goals. Too many of my patients, and including myself in this, grew up in environments that we were compared, like compared against our neighbors, compared against our classmates, our cousins, our siblings. And that comparison is often not very healthy. And in fact, it also, over time, I've noticed that it actually becomes the voice, the critical voice in our adults, that they have then adopted, that they start comparing themselves with their peers at work. What that would often translate into is that they might have very poor self-esteem. And it's actually more often than not, it's not that they can't do the task, but it's the fact that they don't feel like they can, and their confidence affects their ability to do so. So in that same vein, in a PSLE setting, perhaps instead of comparing their results with their peers, we can kind of help them build healthy competition within themselves. Like, what are some goals that they set out to reach, and how can they have a healthy competition in service of a particular value that you want them to develop, and then get there using that value.
Yeah, that's so true. So the way that we speak to our kids, it has to be more positive. The language.
Yes, not so positive, but to be like more neutral and present. So I think like an analogy that I sometimes offer to the parents in my clinic or the clients is that the younger you are, right, as a person, the more absorbent you are, like a cotton wool. So think about like you're a cotton wool dipped in coffee, right? Black coffee. The younger you are, the more absorbent you are of the entire coffee. And then you take this cotton wool and you put it into another cup, and it can be a cup of milk. But the coffee stains are mostly absorbed, and whatever that they can absorb later will become significantly lesser. So the environment that they are in has a very significant impact on what they would develop into. So if you create a very supportive, loving, healthy environment where you celebrate small successes, you celebrate the values, you celebrate the fact that they didn't give up and they had improvements versus outcome, then they are more likely to carry this through in their own adulthood, which is kind of what I imagine a lot of parents want, right? We want our children to be able to survive society and to succeed in it.
Thank you for the analogy, Dr. Annabelle. But I think we need to speed up a little bit, running behind.
Yeah, almost there. Okay, sorry. Okay, so also to encourage the interest, passion, and finding strengths so that we are not only focused on the weaknesses or the inabilities. So modeling healthy stress management includes having a lot of open conversations about identifying the emotions and the experiences that we have and how we can cope. So we can share with them, like, for example, when I feel very, very stressed, what will help me is, you know, mommy is very stressed now. I need to go for a run. Would you like to come with me? Right? And so then we actually show them that when you're stressed, you go for a run. And we can also show them like through healthy problem solving strategies, or even drawing boundaries, like, you know, having very broad boundaries and trying to keep within them, within, like, for example, with the learning. So for example, a 6-step way of responding to emotions will be helping them identify, like, I am feeling very anxious, allowing them a safe space to talk about it without judging them or criticizing them, getting them to be very descriptive about what they're anxious about and what is causing them to feel that way. Empathizing, which means I can imagine that you would feel this way, or I can't even begin to imagine how awful it is for you. I would actually avoid saying, yeah, I understand, because sometimes I understand can be quite dismissive, but say I can imagine, or, I can't even begin to think about how difficult it is for you. Then some age-appropriate choices and boundaries will look like, so would you like to take a break now? And then let's continue together later. So you're giving them an option, but the boundaries, you still must continue. You cannot give up. And you can think about your value to guide that boundary. So if your value is perseverance, then that will be your boundary. Stay and comfort. So don't just kind of let them be on their own devices, because they might feel very alone in the process. So some very quick practical ways to support would be, I always believe in maintaining basic foundations of sleeping, exercising, proper nutrition, and play.
I'm going to hand it back over to you again, Dr. Annabelle.
Thanks, Dawn. I'm very heartened to know that our attendees are quite aware of the optimal number of sleep that our kids need.
Yeah.
But I also must tell you that in my clinical experience, more often than not, our kids are undersleeping. Our kids are actually clocking about an average of 6 to maximum 8 hours of sleep. And if you get 8 hours, you know, it's one of the more informed parent, but a lot of them are ranging around 6 hours. And what happens is because they are not well rested, they are not really able to regulate their emotions, and they're also not really able to pay attention in school. That then results in a bit of a vicious cycle where they feel like they're always catching up. So really, like, sleep is very important because it helps to consolidate the learning. In fact, our brain is the busiest when we are sleeping because it's like an organizational storage space where it starts to defrag and starts to put information together. So prioritizing that 9 to 11 hours of sleep is actually quite important for our kids. Play is very, very important because play allows us to develop creativity. Play encourages us to have like problem-solving skills, to be more adaptive in our functioning, in our social skills. And there are all these different types of play. And perhaps we can also be a bit more aware, or a bit more like kind of have more discussions with our kids in terms of the kind of play that they are interested in. So whether it is like, for example, if they are very competitive, then helping them engage in like competitive games like ball games or soccer would be really helpful. So look into the different types of play. When it comes to helping them regulate their emotions or relaxation, it will be modeling the healthy behaviors and consider our own attitudes towards rest. Because sometimes my patients actually tell me, I never ever seen my parents rest. And every time I want to play games and rest, my parents scold me and they say I must study first. So maybe we need to consider our own attitudes and values and whether we have a bit of a balance between rest and play. And we can also teach them like breathing strategies. So that can come in a form of like relaxation breathing, of like breathing in and out through your nose to the count of 4, or even like teaching like mindfulness. There are different types of mindfulness apps there. And one of my favorites is the UCLA Mindful app. It's actually a free app by the School of UCLA, and they have different types of mindful breathing exercises that you can try to use. Basically, mindfulness is the practice of paying attention in a special way. So helping them be present will help with the learning and will help with managing their stress levels. So a lot of all these, this slide, on this slide, I've talked about it before. It's about like the value, you know, focusing on the value. And the one that I may want to pay a bit more attention to is the part about encouraging and reward during and not after. This is really important because if you encourage after, you are encouraging an outcome versus the process. So you might want to actually focus on encouraging them the during, the act of studying and the act of persevering. Okay, the very last slide I have is the way to communicate. I think that when the stress levels mount, oftentimes we don't have enough, like we don't actually pay attention to changing the dynamics in the present moment. I think it's very different when we say you have to study for 30 minutes, then you can take a rest, versus like, let's make it into a game. You know, if you get to the lift before me, you get extra 30 minutes of play, you get extra 30 minutes of rest. Or, you know, we can also communicate by saying things like, I see you're focusing really hard on your math sums. That is in the present moment process, not after. And I see that you're getting frustrated, helping them to identify the emotion because you can't figure this out yet. The word yet is a magic word, like yet, because you can do it. So I'm going to get some water to drink to clear my mind first, because I also can't figure it out. Do you want some? Then we can work on it together. So this way you're showing them to manage stress. You can take a moment, go drink some water, clear your mind, and we come back and problem solve together.
Wow.
All right, that's all for me.
Oh, I love it. I'm learning so much. No, I'm like mom, like so many times already, and I'm still learning how to be a better parent through like these last few slides that you have. the way that we speak to them, making this something that we're going through together versus, okay, you're on your own, and then I kind of tell me when you need help, okay? But these little stops in between that process, I think is so important. And yes, thank you so much for reminding us once again, Dr. Annabelle. All right, so yes, we've learned how we can prepare our children emotionally. Now let's move on to learning about how we can prepare them academically. All right, so here's our next speaker, Meng Hui from KooBits. Hi, Meng Hui.
Hey, hi, Dawn. Hi,
Yes.
everyone. Hi, Bob.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meng Hui from KooBits. Thank you for joining us tonight. I hope you have a lovely dinner just now. Right, I think you can see from the screen, I'm a parent too. I have two boys, primary 2 and primary 5. Okay, I know Dawn have a P5. So do we have other parents here with P2 and P5 kids like me? Do we have like parents with kids of similar age? So I believe most of us are preparing in the midst of preparing our kids for weighted assessment. Who is actually having weighted assessment this week and next week? I think then we are probably busy with the same thing during the weekend.
Back to you, Meng Hui.
Right. Thanks. Oh, interesting. We actually have the majority of us in this tonight preparing PSLE for the first time as a parent. Actually, it's the same for me. I went through PSLE with others' parents' kids 18 times. But next year is actually the first time I'll be preparing PSLE as a parent for the first time. So it's quite interesting. So far, it has been a very interesting journey. I am enjoying very much. So what I'm going to do, basically these are the 4 things I will touch on. I try to make it as simple as possible. So actually, after my sharing, I hope that you will have a clearer understanding, and perhaps some of the suggestions I make will be fruitful for you. I'll touch on points where for parents with kids not taking PSLE this year, primary 1 to all the way to primary 5, what can you do like just to start earlier? Then I will touch on how to prepare for PSLE, some suggestion to come up with a winning study plan, focusing on math and science because that's my core area. And finally, some tips for not just the kids. Now we also need to support the parents. So yep, let's start. Yes, start early. For this is meant for parents who actually have kids not taking PSLE this year. Interestingly, just now I saw the poll. We actually had some participants here tonight with yet to have kids. Wow, you really start early. so okay, my suggestion for PSLE preparation. Don't start exam preparation too early. Just take note when we say don't start exam preparation too early. The key thing is exam. So we can prepare for PSLE, but when we say exam preparation, we highly recommend not to start preparation focusing on exam techniques and exam conditioning at too early the stage. For example, let's say like preschool or even like primary 1, primary 2. Exam technique preparation shouldn't be the focus of learning. In fact, there are studies done by many researchers to show that if we start focusing too much on exam techniques and all the shortcuts, it sometimes can be counterproductive when we start too early. Learning at the younger age should actually be focusing on developing the love for learning, promote curiosity, and I like what Dr. Annabelle shared just now is the environment that matters. I highly recommend parents to focus more on like creating the opportunity for the kids to be exposed to different things at the younger age. I think that's very crucial. Make it fun. Learning is actually the most effective when it does not feel like work. So a lot of time where I just now I saw some of the parents say, oh, my child doesn't want to do this, my child doesn't do that. There's a high possibility that they perceive that as work. If we can actually make the child learn or create an environment for the child to learn and they don't feel like it is work, that means they learn subconsciously, it will be the most effective. Many studies have shown that. So one simple example is like you say, come, baby, come, let's learn. Oh, okay, sorry, I call my kids. let's revise for spelling or let's learn spelling. You can see the mood was immediately drop. So how do we improve like vocabulary? So one of the things we have been playing since their preschool until even today, there's this word game that we like to play in the car. You know, when we are out, mommy will play, then sometimes I'll just trip him, of course, because I'm driving. Like we just say, okay, alphabet A, name all the words starting with A. So it's like Boggle or like Scrabble, depends how you see. But we just play along, you know, just spend time in the car. So that's a simple game that we play. So this is so we do very often. And I can see that actually it helps in my little one's vocabulary. So this is but he learns because to him he's not learning all the spelling. He is actually playing the car with us. Then we come up with some small little prize like when we reach where you can choose what to eat or something like that. Yeah, right. Okay. So so the next one will be involve a lot of question and discussion. I cannot stress this enough. The key is I know as parents, I actually did something I remind myself a lot because I do quite a bit of consulting work. Don't provide the answer all the time. When someone asks you a question, when your child asks you a question, don't be the one say, oh, I need to answer this. I need to, but then when there's a problem, I need to solve that. You do not have to do that. Actually, a better way is actually to provide them with questions or leads to discuss together. Let them find the answer themselves. And one important thing, especially at a young age, ask them questions and make them develop the ability to present their thoughts. Our child should be develop the ability and feel at ease to share their views. This is something that's very valuable. So right or wrong doesn't matter. Like common, you know, they will tell you something, then you know from the adult point, wow, this is so silly. Straight we say no, then you actually cut them off. It's okay. It's actually okay. Presentation skill to be able to present your thoughts is actually a very valuable skill that we should start from young. So let them share their thoughts. Let them discuss with you. Then once they reach about P3, P4, then it's fine. Then we actually start to, when they come with a problem, do not try to solve immediately. Ask them back. What do you, for example, like some questions like, what do you think causes this? What do you think we can do? So these are the things that will help them to connect. Of course, we're not saying that we don't solve it. If let's say eventually after everything they try and doesn't, then we can say, what do you think this is possible? Then you slowly lead to the solution. This may seems like it is actually not problem solving or not say learning. It is. One simple example. Do we have any P3 parents here? Your child will probably be learning let's say a kind of math concept called guess and check. So many parents actually used to think that, you know, guess and check, how do you do faster? The kids who do guess and check better are the ones with very good mental calculation. Yes, having a very good mental calculation speed does help in guess and check kind of question. But actually, for a guess and check question, what are they actually testing? They are actually testing whether are you able to connect the dots. When I change one factor, what does it lead to? What does it change for another factor, and does it lead to the outcome I want? Then you counter check. So actually, if a child who can actually connect the dots very well through the earlier years, right, you'll find that most of these kids, they can do guess and check very, very well, regardless whether they have very fast calculation speed. I mean, that's a bonus. But the one who can calculate very fast but couldn't connect the dots will just, you know, move in circles. So actually, that's the skill that you can start from young. So it's a math skill, but you can develop from other ways. Okay, so develop the habit, the ability to make decisions. Many parents will share with me over the years, like they don't know how to start. The first step is always the hardest. Sometimes it's actually due to the understanding of the concept. It's true, but very often after we discuss with the child, we realize that they do have some idea how to start. They are just not very comfortable making a decision to take the first step. This is something that actually will affect significantly during exam. So don't wait until when you're prepared for exam, then you start to learn how to take the first step. It's actually start earlier. So you don't prepare for the exam, but you develop this ability to make decisions. And that eventually will come and help the child during the exam preparation. Right. So yes.
Sorry, in the essence of time, and we still have quite a number of slides. I'm going to have to do a bit.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Right. Okay, emphasize on understanding and over memorization. Don't everything. That's why I said don't start exam technique too early. Don't go and try to cram in all the formulas, all this. I know there's a lot of books or let's say tutors who can tell you all these things. My suggestion will be strike a balance. Understanding is always more important. Then for growth, same thing. Celebrate small wins. So basically, set small goals and then achieve them. focus on the action, not the result. Later during the exam preparation, I can actually share more about that. Then teamwork, one simple thing. Don't try to be the teacher if you are, okay, if you have the ability to teach your child, let's say if you are very comfortable with math and science, fantastic. Or let's say you are very good English or Chinese person, fantastic. If not, it's okay to learn together. It's okay to say that I don't know. So in fact, the best way for the child to learn is for them to teach you. So don't stress out trying to be the one who knows everything. I think that will be a very valuable thing. Good. I think let's start PSLE. Yeah. Thanks, Don, for reminding. Yes. Right. Math. Yeah. Singapore math curriculum is a monster. In terms of size, we have really one of the it's a humongous curriculum compared to like many places in the world. So the key thing is divide and conquer. I like to use the concept of the power of one. Later, I can give you one example. Will be focus on one topic per week, 1 week, and then slowly get to it. If you can use shorter time, fair enough. But the idea is always focus on one first. Varying your learning approach. Many learners, student, parent, one of the simplest way, as common things they do is they will, when they say, oh, prepare for exam, do exam paper. Any parents say are doing like bought like past year papers, 10-year series, all this you've been doing. Yes, correct. common, yeah. Okay, so doing exam paper is part of revision. That's true. The key thing is, what does the exam paper help the child prepare? So basically, it's exam paper get the child to expose to exam style question. They develop the ability to perform well under exam condition. Basically, we call it exam conditioning. However, if the child is at the stage where I do not understand certain concept, I need to I don't know certain things. Doing exam paper is not for learning. Doing exam paper is actually for conditioning, for assessing whether they are good. So you actually need to know at which stage your child is. If a child doesn't understand, doing exam paper actually is actually not useful. So this is something. So have a mixture. I'm not saying don't do exam paper, but you have a variation of it. Then next, okay, so high return. You know, in business we call it ROI. so in study, so what should we do? So one common thing for math will be, paper 1, paper 2. Then okay, the primary 5 and above parents will know what I'm talking about. So once they move into primary 5, they will start to do exam format. So basically, you have paper 1, you have paper 2. So for P6 parents, you should know this very well. 45 marks, 50 marks. Cannot use calculator, can use calculator. That's a very common. Parents will know about this. That's fine. But then many parents say, oh, my paper 1 is very okay, but the 55 mark, the paper 2, I'm facing a lot of problem, all these things, and a lot of stress. Actually, there's actually I recommend a different way to look at this situation. Actually, look at the marks. Actually, that means you actually allocate the which one. Actually, if you look at the paper, you realize that 70% of the marks, which is the majority of the marks, are actually the more manageable question. So this is one suggestion of how you can look at the paper. Instead of looking at the left side, the 55 versus the 55, you actually split the whole paper. Parents probably here will be quite familiar with if you see the exam paper before. You have 1 mark, 2 mark, 3 mark, 4 mark, 5 mark question, 47 question. The first 40 question, which is in the yellow zone, account for 70% of the marks, and they are actually the more manageable questions. So very simple. One suggestion: if your kids is now scoring 70% or less, my recommendation is to focus on the yellow part first. And when you prepare for all this, I suggest you take the approach of revise by topics. That means you focus. For example, this week, I focus on, let's say, decimal. You just settle everything about decimal, then you move on. Then you say, I need ratio, then you do ratio, then you move on. You start from your weakest topic to your strongest topic. So your pace will start to pick up along the way because you get more and more comfortable. By the time for this 70%, I highly recommend you should probably get at least 50 to 55. That means, in short, your child should pass by this section alone, at least. And if you're already in the 60, 65, not even full marks, then that's fabulous. That's really a very good position. And when you are in that position, then you move into the green zone, which is the last 7 questions, which is what I call more challenging world problem. And when you are in this area, then I suggest that you actually prepare them by heuristic. What's heuristic? I think some parents will know. This is the 12th method to solve word problems under MOE. This is MOE syllabus. So this is not something that is meant that you actually can go and look for it. Is that I think you can find it in the MOE website. So these are the 12. That means same thing out of the 12. Don't try to all look at 12 together. You will get confused. I barely know any parent who can name all 12. So you just start with one. I think most of us will be very familiar with draw diagram, which is draw model. So that's the first one. That accounts probably about at least 1/4 to 1/3 of the curriculum. Then after that, you start to spread. Those who are now in your P3 and P4, you have P3, P4 kids, you probably will learn more in the blue color part. Then for the slightly older parents, the kids P5, P6, you will start to learn before and after when you do ratio, working backwards, all this. Move around one by one topic at a time. Once your child can have about 6 to 7 of these, right, they are actually in quite a comfortable position. That is actually how you can prepare yourself. Okay, before we move into slides, I think I moved too fast. It's one thing is what's the frequency. My highest suggestion will be 3 to 5 times at least, about 30 minutes to 60 minutes per week. But these include all the supplementary that your child is taking, all the tuitions, everything. So it's not add-on, it's actually part of it. As much as possible, shorter duration, more frequency. So that's better. Let me spread it out. Consistency is actually better than intensity. So this is something that, and try not to do too much exam paper at this stage of the time. I'll suggest you go for topical and heuristic individual first. You can probably go into exam conditioning around July. I'll touch on that much later. So yes, let's move on to science. Similarly, I think by now you probably will see some of the things are repeating because I think that's something that I truly believe. PSLE science is actually it's a smaller curriculum. Our science is actually a smaller curriculum compared to math, but it's still pretty huge. Same thing, divide and conquer, power of one. That means you identify one topic that your child needs to improve, spend 1 week with it on it, then before you move on. If you say, I do not have so many topics to focus on, and then congratulations, then you're already in a very positive position. So this is something like that. So actually, as you review it, you will realize that actually what your child's need. Similarly, your learning approach is I always recommend, don't always do exam paper for a similar reason. In fact, if some of you already get the PSLE past 3 years, you know the booklet, so some schools will actually buy it for you. You realize that actually there's 2 versions. If you go to popular bookshop also, you'll see that there's 2 versions. One is actually in the yearly form. The other one actually they split all the questions into topical. So actually, this is actually something that's highly recommended. That means that there are some learners who actually will function better when you actually split them into topics rather than to do the full paper. Know when to do the paper. They are useful, but that's not all your learning options. Then for science paper, you have also 2 parts. So you have actually the MCQ and the OEQ. Okay, let me speed out on this. So most parents will say, my child MCQ is actually very okay. They can pass. It's the open-ended question or the 44 marks that they cannot get. Actually, one simple guide. If your child is aiming to do like better, if you wish to get a slightly better score, let's say AR4 and above, right? Your MCQ should work towards maximum 3 to 5 marks error. That's all. 3 to 5 question error. That's all. 3. It's usually 3 is a good. So if let's say you are in the 30 plus to low 40 zone, I think there's still area for improvement. Still work on it. And how do you work on it? Focus on revising by topic. So it's very simple. A simple way to solve problem is the POYA approach. Identify the problem, solve the question, check your answer. So how the kids actually, whenever they look at a question, they should be able to identify which topic it is being tested. This is a skill that I think can easily you can even start this earlier. Let's say even at P3, P4. After you know which is the topic, then the next thing is know which is the concept. For example, in this case, the child should be able to identify that, yeah, this is actually reproduction in plants, and then this is actually about the function of the parts. Be able to do that. If you want to write down, fine. If you say verbally, I can actually do this, it's also fantastic. And for open-ended, which is actually the common challenge for most kids, right? The key thing is be exposed to the variety first. The last thing we want is the kid gets shocked during it. So you actually can see, oh, I have this, be able to understand all the different setup. Just get a hang of it. Then I think that will certainly help the child. In terms of frequency, similarly, I will recommend same thing. So probably 3 to 5, if not slightly less, 3 to 4. Same thing, 30 minutes, 60 minutes per session. Try to do about 5 to 10 questions each time. Consistency over intensity. Okay, parents' time. so what should the parents be doing? So there are four main things that I think I hope you will actually look into this. What should you be doing as a parent? What is your role? So actually, parent play a very important role. I enjoy Dr. Chow just now her sharing. Actually, the parent really play a major part in all this whole thing. Parents sitting in front of the screen, probably like me, you are probably the administrator, the logistic officer, you are the chef, you are the chauffeur. If you need to teach your own kids, you're the teacher. Then you're also the counselor, you're the discipline master. I think we have so many hats to wear, correct?
Yeah.
So actually, the key thing is, in a way, all these are actually possible to outsource. I'm not saying you should, that you can if you want to. But there's some, so be very clear what is one role that you should do it yourself. Be very clear. There's one role that you must do yourself. That is to be daddy and mommy. That's something that you can never outsource. So like what Dr. Chow shared just now is, during this journey, it's important, the key thing is be present. During just now, one of the key points you shared, I think, yes, be present. Let them know that this is a journey for all of us. It's not your journey. So when we talk about during discussion, don't be you, me, it's actually us. Actually, that makes a lot difference. So one simple example is, when's the last time you talked to your PSLE child? That means your P6 child. I mean recently. When do you last chat with your child? Not study related. What's the usually first question that you see ask your child when you come back from home? Have you done your homework? Learn spelling already or not? Have you done this? Have you done that? So you see, what is the first thing you focus on? What is the most important to you? The child can sense it. It's important to, sometimes adjust a bit from our end. You really have to think, how does it feel from the child point of view? And so key thing is, you should be the one that they look for when they feel tired. You should feel the one that they want to share sudden joy. When they feel tired, they feel vulnerable, frustrated, you should be the one that they turn to, not hiding away from you. You need to become their biggest cheerleader. That takes practice, but the good news is you still have time. Your child still have time to prepare for PSLE, so do you. So for the next few, for what happened next month, I think most of you should know lah. May is weighted assessment, then June holiday. July usually school will start revising. So don't worry, Singapore schools, you will definitely see a lot more homework, the exam paper will come. So that one you can leave it to them. August is the time where you start to really feel PSLE is coming because oral starts. And this is where usually the nervousness and the fatigue will start to set in. This is the time where you actually really need to play that crucial role. That means be able to be very supportive. September is the exam month. Once you hit the listening compre at the 15th of Sep, then you know that it's coming. PSLE every year starts on the last Thursday of September. So spread yourself. You actually have months to plan. So and I cannot stress this enough. Be intentional to plan rest and play. Like what Dr. Chow said, really plan those things. Those are not optional. That means like you finish your work, then you go and play. You do it, then you rest. No, rest is an essential part. Play is an essential part. It's actually part of the timetable. They are not removable. That means they need to study, but they also need to have fun. Be intentional in playing. I'm just not saying playing whole day, but put in. Then that is be intentional about it. Forming a habits, sleeping habits, eating habits, whatever habits. Minimum 21 days. I think everyone knows that, but 21 days is actually very challenging. Okay, so although it's the bare minimum, if you really have a child who is, the sleeping part that Dr. Chow said, right? If you want to change the sleeping habit, do not do it like, let's say, September. If you want to change something, you should start. Slowly adjust. You wouldn't want someone who usually sleep at 11 or 12. Suddenly say the night before PSL, you go and sleep at 8:30. I can guarantee you, the person will be counting sheep in the room until 11 or 12, and then that actually creates anxiety. Eating habits also. Start early. Final week, last one, wrapping up. Be present. If possible, plan your schedule. Be available. Be more available. I'm not saying you have to take leave the whole week or something. If you can, good. If not, it's fine. It's like be available. Try to be around. And I think it's possible for you to plan your work schedule with 3.5 months to 4 months ahead. I think that's the main part. Do not cram everything that night. It doesn't really work that way. I mean, if you're not feeling well, you won't eat the whole box of medicine, right? I think you will get more sick. So yeah, so this is my part. I think let's give some room for the Q&A. Yeah, that's my part. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Meng Hui. Yes, I really took down a lot of notes already. So there's so much that was reiterated by Meng Hui after what Dr. Annabelle has also shared. So it's really important that we help our children as well, support our children to be able to find that balance, taking care of them, their well-being, instead of just, always pushing them as well. But yes, we do have quite a number of questions from everybody. Thank you so much for contributing all of them. All right, so I'm gonna start asking our experts now some of these questions. First one, over to Dr. Annabelle first. All right, so question number one, somebody asked mobile phone ownership, right? That was something that you talked about earlier as well. My kid is pestering me to buy her a mobile phone due to peer pressure. And she promises to do well for her PSLE if I can let her have it now. But I'm highly concerned because she's not disciplined enough. What is your suggestion?
I think that in today's world, there's a lot of mobile phone screen time concern, right? So I think with all the mobile phone questions, the guiding principle will always be, actually not just mobile phone questions, it will always be connection before correction. So seek to understand first before you make a decision or want to make like any advice or get into any kind of conflict situation. So connection first, like, why is this child so stressed about not having a mobile phone? What is it about the peer pressure? And actually, if I just turn tables and then imagine that from our child's perspective, if everyone has a mobile phone and everyone is connected to each other through like WhatsApp, Telegram, and then they can organize for social activities, or they're trading study notes, or they are like talking about like something exciting that is happening on TV or something like that, and they are missing out. I think in their language, they call it FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. And then they might feel like they are not part of the in-group and they can feel socially isolated. So that can be like a common reason. But just keep an open mind as a parent to be really curious and to understand, like seek to understand what is it about having a mobile phone that is very important for them and what is actually happening for them in school. So find out their perspective, find out their experiences, acknowledge the emotions. So validate that, okay, I can imagine that it can be very anxiety provoking to miss out on all of this, or, I can imagine that it's very frustrating when your friends cannot reach you, or you cannot reach your friends when you want to talk to them when you're stressed. Then talk about the behaviors, right? Like have some boundaries. So for example, if we do get a mobile phone together, come up with some terms and conditions, when you can use, how you can use. Like a very simple thing to think about is, can you bring your phone to sleep? Or must you surrender your phone and leave it outside and you can't bring it to bed? So have some broad boundaries that both you and your child can agree with, and the usage. And then talk also about the consequences of breaking those boundaries. And then have the child list them themselves, what the consequences are. And then you can decide if you want to go ahead and get them a phone and how to use it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for answering that. It actually answered a second question that was very similar to this as well. But there was also somebody who mentioned that their child actually gets angry and locks himself up in the room because the mother or father doesn't want to give him the phone. So is it okay? The parent's question is it okay to scold him for this kind of behavior, for this reason?
So I think firstly, before we scold, we must always connect before correct, because that, remember, it's about like having that relationship, right? So acknowledging that the anger is actually okay, like the anger is actually valid, right? So if we don't, if we had an agreed time and if we don't give our child a mobile phone for whatever the reason is, the child has the right to be angry, because actually the fact is we will also be if the same thing happened to us. But there is no specific right or wrong for this in terms of like whether to scold or not, but perhaps the parent must decide whether there's a safety issue with the child locking himself in his room. If there is a safety issue, then that's the boundary. Then you must talk about not allowing that. That it's okay for you to be angry, but it's not okay for you to lock yourself in the room. And we can talk about what you can do when you're angry. But if there's no safety concerns about like him locking himself in the room and he just really needed time for himself to calm down, then perhaps it's also okay to give them that time to calm down. But I imagine that as a parent, it's like how it's done, right? Like if you just like throw a tantrum and then slam the door, then that will be something that we want to say is not okay. Then we want to address that behavior. The important thing is you can't address it when both of you are on an emotional high. You need to wait for this to blow over and both of you are calm before you talk about what to do moving forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Annabelle. Okay. All right. So next question is actually for Meng Hui. All right. Somebody was asking that, saying that their P5 boy has totally no interest in studies at all, especially with math sums, problem sums. So he goes for tuition, but it also doesn't help much. How?
Right. P5. So I don't know which parent asked this. Hi, we are fellow parents with P5 boys. So it's a common challenge. So my first, because we don't have that in the question, right? One of the suggestion will be, it's important to look at when we say the child has no interest in math. Is it a sudden change? That means like the boy has been pretty okay with math or enjoying math, and it's like when you reach primary 5, then he start to dislike it. That's one. Or it has been like math has not been the favorite thing to do all along. It actually is a very two different approach. Because the reason is because actually the most common dip in interest in study, there was a study previously. P5 is actually the turning point in Singapore education. Those parents who actually, if you're not preparing PSLE for son, you probably will know this, or you have heard from many parents. It's like P5 is actually the hardest year, actually across 6 years of study in Singapore. P6 is actually like stressful because of PSLE, but actually in terms of academic or let's say like workload, everything, P5 is actually the heaviest. So actually the turning point for many child is actually at primary 5, that you actually have seen like high achievers or people who love learning, then suddenly just take a deep. Used to be the exam that most kids first time fail in their life is actually P5 ME exam. Interestingly, it's because now MOE actually removed that ME exam, so no more already. So actually that exam is actually like the most failure in the child. Most kids actually fail their first time is actually that exam in Singapore. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so first thing is my suggestion will be to find the root cause of, let's say the child doesn't enjoy doing that. Is that I don't like math. I think that's a very big talk. And another thing will be the parents, your role is actually may not be the one talking. Your role is actually to discover who will be the best person to get the answer out of your boy. It can be you, it can be a friend, so your like I said, you have many hats. You may be the one that can best get the answer out. You may be the person who can get that best person to talk to your child. Find the person who can connect most to get this. So because sometimes, some relationship, the kids, when they look at a parent, they will not talk. So this may not. You may even want to talk to the school teacher or school counselor. It can be possible. Your job is to get the answer out. It means you may not be necessarily be that person to do that. And then generally people, like any human being, it's a human nature. We all like to win. So actually it's important to create a winning feeling. That's why you say set some small goal, something that's really highly achievable for your boy. Like just now when you say he doesn't like to do a problem, is it a topic that he's not familiar, or is it a heuristic approach that he's not familiar? Focus on one. Spend 1 week preparing for it. Then let him go and try again. The moment he has solved the first one, celebrate. The kids like that kind of feeling. Then make a little bit more hoo-ha of it. So it's okay. Then after that, start with more. Then as that solving momentum increases, you will actually start to see that the increase, the ability will start to grow. So most of the time, it's not a matter of ability. It's actually a matter of confidence, and the matter of confidence will affect interest. So this is my suggestion. But because I don't really know the exact situation, I think then that's usually how we can approach this question.
Yeah, it's true. We can't really find the solution until we actually find the reason.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much, Meng Hui. All right, so next question is for Dr. Annabelle once again. Someone's child has very high expectations on herself and is giving herself a lot of stress unnecessarily. How can we help her to relax? They're actually quite chill parents, so they don't know why she's pushing herself so much.
So I think this is the very common phenomenon now because it's very competitive in school and with like their own same age peers. So similarly, I think it would be the connection before like correction, finding out what it means to her to get those results and get those grades and what kind of grades she is expecting herself to get. And also kind of having very open conversations about like what does it mean to her if she doesn't achieve those marks, what happens, what happens in school, or to kind of really try to tease out whether there has been like bullying that has happened in school, or like maybe even potentially any kind of self-esteem kind of issues. So the conversation is really quite important. Ask open-ended conversations, open-ended questions to elicit more responses. So don't say things like, oh, did someone bully you in school? But maybe ask like, also what's happening for you? What does it mean to score this or not to score this? And is it like specific to this result? And where is this coming from? How are you feeling about this? On the other hand, you can also encourage like doing activities together. So instead of saying like, oh, you should rest or you should this and you should that, perhaps you can organize to do things together. Like, so organize to go do exercise together, to go running together, swimming together, do like art or pottery or like, just doing activities together. And then the last thing is again sticking to some broad boundaries that, okay, like respecting that your child, if you feel like whatever that he or she has told you is reasonable, then to learn to respect it, but have some boundaries in the sense that, okay, but these are no-go zones, which means you must still come out to have dinner with us. You can't just be in your room the whole time studying. You must turn off and sleep at whatever hour. And every like Sunday morning, it's like family time. So have some boundaries that you can both establish together and try to stick to.
Wow, makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I'm definitely going to share that with my friends who are going through that same thing. I have two friends who are going through that same problem as well. So thank you, Dr. Annabelle. Next question from Meng Hui once again. All right, somebody's a P6 girl. She recently has changed from being passionate and keen with her studies to disliking her school and her form teacher. So since P1, they've been telling her to put her standard 2 and above 90. 2 and above 90 for spelling or 10. Now at P6, her grade remains as between A2 to A4. But this year, P6 really, so the worst year with not so happy form teachers in school. Wondering how to encourage her again. Thank you in advance.
Right, very good question. Similar to just now, that question will be, I hear is she's suddenly deep in performance. She also suddenly just dislikes certain things like the school environment or the teacher. I think it's important to find out why first. It's like perhaps is like what Dr. Chow said. So ask, is there anything that happened? And I like to repeat this again. Sometimes parent may not be the best person to get the answer out of this question. So of course, if it's a form teacher issue, don't go and ask the form teacher to go and ask this to arrange something. I think that I give school a lot of credit. I'm privileged to work with quite a number of schools due to my work at KooBits. I've seen school able to provide a lot of support for the child and parents. They are actually quite well trained there. So number one will be find out the reason first. That's number one. And generally, it may the way I look at it is it may be due to a bit of anxiety or stress. Of course, okay, clinical terms. so maybe it's nervous. They're just nervous, and perhaps the burden of PSLE can be affecting them also, especially at this age. The teenage years lah. So a lot of moving factors. So one suggestion is have a word with her. Similarly, so now I think there's a deep, but is it across the board? Because from this message, I also couldn't really see. So similarly, divide and conquer, work on one item first, celebrate every success. The fact that the child used to get 90 and above means AL, this child is actually an AL1 caliber child, means that there's no doubt about ability. So that's actually a very good sign. So the next thing will be, is there anything, what causes that? You are at the refining area. Let's say, for example, math, what causes that deep? Is it a certain topic? Is it a certain approach? So because at primary 5, primary 6 already, right, some of the approach very different, like maybe the child is just not handling before and after very well. The child is just not handling, let's say, percentage very well. You actually can cite, given her score, actually the range that you need to go and find that problem is actually not very big because she's already quite good. I think then you actually just focus on that one or two things, then very soon they will she will be get on track. And last thing will be, since she's having some issue in school, right? So the next best thing is actually what do you want? So she should find comfort at home. So that's even more important than how you create. This, like we said, when she's frustrated, she's angry, or she's like she has she should feel that home is still safer. By making her feel safe, people perform best when they feel safe. So this is something that we need to create, that kind of feeling. If she is very unhappy in school, when she returns home, she's very wary about you. That's a very stressful thing, right? Then I cannot imagine. You give it a doubt. You just imagine it's us. You're very stressed at work, go home, you cannot tell anybody. Will you feel as stressed as an adult? I will. So actually you think from a child, then we are talking about a 12-year-old girl. So this is how we should. So I suggest you can look at one area, then work with your partner, whoever is supporting this situation. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Meng Hui, for that. All right, so because we're running out of time, but there's still questions that if your questions are not answered, don't worry, okay? We're still going to ask our experts to help you out with it, and you will be able to find it on the Singapore Parenting Festival's website, okay? All right, so last two questions, all right? Next one is for Dr. Annabelle, all right? So I know you covered this earlier, but somebody was asking if there are any clear red flags, right? So how do I know if I need to bring my child to see a psychologist? Are there any red flags that we need to take note of?
So probably 3 areas to take note of. One is actually you don't really need to wait for red flags to happen or like a crisis to happen before you see a psychologist yourself or to bring your child to one, because your child might actually benefit from just learning how to regulate emotions, manage stress, manage social interactions. And these are just like social skills situations. So don't really need to wait for a crisis to happen to come. The second thing is, I think as a parent, I always recommend that you trust your gut feeling. I think that you know your child best. You interact with your child. It's your child. So if something doesn't feel quite right, trust that instinct. You're probably right, and it's probably better to just get it checked out even if you're not sure. Then the last thing will be some very significant red flags that would really warrant a visit will be, you find that this child is experiencing quite a lot of difficulties in different areas of their life. So like having difficulties performing academically, having a lot of like friendship issues, not being able to get along with anyone at home, with siblings, having difficulties like managing conflict, or if they say things like, I wish I wasn't here, nobody cared for me if I ran away, or maybe if you start to observe any kind of like self-harming behaviors, like, cutting or like skin picking, hair pulling, or like, one actually common one that has been happening is that, they cut themselves with pen knife. Or if they find that they start to exhibit things like they start to withdraw themselves from everyone, basically the ecosystem, then they are not eating, they're not sleeping, and then, they keep talking about suicide, or they tell you that they're feeling very helpless, they're feeling very hopeless, or they become very, very irritable or very teary, they start to like throw tantrum quite significantly more, then I think these will be red flags that I will say definitely don't wait.
Yeah. So I think like what Dr. Annabelle shared earlier, sometimes it doesn't have to become so extreme, and our children can still benefit if you decide to just bring them in earlier, right? So thank you for that. One last question now for Meng Hui. All right, so somebody said, when my child does exam practice papers, he's very focused on the score he gets when marking the paper, and he gets very upset and demoralized when he didn't do well. How do I help him understand that he should learn from the mistakes he makes now and not the score that he gets?
Well, that's a good question. Firstly, same. I do not know the age of this child, so I will just give something like more general. I suppose slightly older. I mean, let me just give, let's say, P5, P6 example, because this is a prepare for PSLE webinar. From the description, so one type. This is the when during my teaching days, or even like now during at KooBits when we communicate with our customer. Very often such category is we are talking about high achievers. So many times that like some kids actually, because they have been doing well, so end up they actually have a certain awareness, and then or they want to maintain a certain image, because for example, this child used to be, you know, like the strongest in math, or like very good in math or something like that, or very good in, let's say, like others. So when because having that title give them the feeling that I need to maintain this image, I need to be this good, and that actually cause them to put in overemphasis on score. So that might be one. Another will be is how actually we adults communicate with the child. It can be a school, someone from the school, or some like even from the family. Do we like since young that we have been praising this child for his intelligence? Like, oh, so clever, like when we praise him on the marks, and this can in a way in a long run can actually affect like influence the child to be more focused on the marks. The good news is all this can be changed, because since you can develop it, that means you actually can also, you know, undo it, but it takes time. One of the things will be generally when we communicate with your child, a suggestion will be focus more on the effort, focus less on the outcome. That means like the score is actually not the most important thing. And do it, don't just say, don't because if you have been talking about score with your child and suddenly you stop talking about the score, right? I can tell you they can detect it. Then actually the next thing what happens is they'll feel very anxious. They will think, why daddy, mommy study don't care about my score? Is it I'm not doing well? It actually make the matter worse. So you have to do it gradually. Sit down with them. If they say they focus on marks more than the mistake, right? Then go through the thing together. But don't talk about the marks. That means like sit down, let's go through this. Like just now, you know, when we discuss, if you are not the person that's to go through this, then let someone do it. But same thing. The whole focus about the paper is to review the paper, go through the mistake, understand, then move on. If you do this repeatedly and place less and less emphasis on the marks, eventually it will influence your child in that thinking also. And if you have observed around, like let's say if you happen to observe, let's say if within your control, you realize that there's someone in the family or within your environment that keep praising about, you know, clever, intelligent rather than effort. Maybe communicate with this family member or whoever is around to share these thoughts, and then so that everybody around will actually cooperate and then move towards that direction. It's the environment that counts. That means, yeah, so we create environment to focus more on the progress, on the relearning, you know, get back up from the mistake rather than focusing on the score, which is the outcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Meng Hui. I think something that we can take away from both our experts tonight is a keyword that they use a lot is support. As parents, we play such a vital role in helping them to feel safe, to feel supported, that actually puts them in a very conducive environment to want to learn, right? So I think like they both said, it starts from the home. Okay, so I think we have much to learn, especially for those who are starting off early. And lastly, because this is already our last webinar for the series of Singapore Parenting Festival this year, 2023. Another huge thanks, all right, to the Asian Parent and MediaCorp for making Singapore Parenting Festival 2023 possible, and also to the Gold partners, Sparkle Tots, PCF, all right, to Dumex, DoGrow, to Scott's, to the content partners, Mums for Life, Dads for Life, Center for Fathering, as well as Hoya. Thank you to the Go partners and content partners. So once again, thank you everybody for taking the time to join us this year for Singapore Parenting Festival. Wishing all of you a very good night. And thank you again to our experts today, Dr. Annabelle and Meng Hui. Thank you. Good night, everyone. Till next year.
Thank you. Good night. Bye.
Bye.